President Trump has used his wide-ranging speech at the UN General Assembly to accuse the UN of financing immigration, which he's described as an assault on Western countries. During his nearly hour-long speech, Donald Trump decried what he called the failed experiment of open borders and told listening world leaders, "Your countries are going to hell." So let's go live to New York, back to our correspondent Katrina Perry, who's there for us. Katrina, over to you.
Indeed, Matthew, as you've been saying there, it was quite the speech. President Trump also accusing the United Nations of failing to live up to its true potential, he said, in sustaining global order, as he claimed credit for ending 7 wars without the help of the United Nations at all, he said, as more than a dozen countries in recent days, including France and the UK, have recognised the state of Palestine. President Trump criticised that decision, saying that this would be a reward for Hamas. He also denounced climate change, claiming it was the greatest con job ever. A statement met with gasps from across the Assembly floor. Well, let's have a listen back to some of what President Trump said.
What is the purpose of the United Nations? The UN has such tremendous potential. I've always said it. It has such tremendous, tremendous potential. But it's not even coming close to living up to that potential. For the most part, at least for now, all they seem to do is write a really strongly worded letter and then never follow that letter up. It's empty words, and empty words don't solve war. The only thing that solves war and wars is action. We have to stop the war in Gaza immediately. We have to stop it. We have to get it done. We have to negotiate. Immediately have to negotiate peace. We got to get the hostages back. We want all 20 back. Now, as if to encourage continued conflict, some of this body is seeking to unilaterally recognize a Palestinian state. The rewards would be too great for Hamas terrorists for their atrocities. This would be a reward for these horrible atrocities. It's climate change. Because if it goes higher or lower, whatever the hell happens, there's climate change. It's the greatest con job ever perpetrated on the world, in my opinion. Climate change, no matter what happens, you're involved in that. No more global warming, no more global cooling. All of these predictions made by the United Nations and many others, often for bad reasons, were wrong. They were made by stupid people that have cost their countries fortunes and given those same countries no chance for success. If you don't get away from this green scam, your country is going to fail. Europe is in serious trouble. They've been invaded by a force of illegal aliens like nobody's ever seen before. Illegal aliens are pouring into Europe. Nobody's doing anything to change it, to get them out. It's not sustainable. And because they choose to be politically correct, they're doing just absolutely nothing about it.
Well, just a little flavour there of President Trump's speech. He spoke for almost an hour. I'm joined here by our North America correspondent, Neda Tawfiq, who is also watching in on that. Now, there's so many points to pick apart from that speech, but we might start with what he said about climate change. Such a key pillar of what the United Nations stands for. And you could hear the gasps and the sense of shock in the room when he referred to it as a hoax, as a con job.
Yeah, that's right, calling it the green scam, the fake Paris Climate Accord. I mean, Donald Trump has made no secret of the fact that he doesn't believe that renewable energy is the path forward. He said that Europe in particular, they're ruining their countries are going to hell, and that they need to stop kind of clinging to that vision that the rest of the global community has shared in the Paris Climate Accord here at the United Nations. You know, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has really tried to appeal to nations, saying it's not just in the kind of existential sense of survival of the planet, but it makes sense economically that renewables are some of the best investments and economic opportunities of this century for countries who get on board. But here you have Donald Trump essentially saying to his allies, you got it wrong, you should listen to me, and you really felt that break, that real distance that he's been having with his allies for a long time on that issue of climate. And many have been messaging me saying they actually didn't expect him to go so hard on climate in this speech, and that has really struck them, and it really does not bode well for kind of the future talks and negotiations. Because don't forget, there are so many smaller countries who are affected by climate change who are still waiting for funding from the likes of the US, China, and the biggest polluters to help get climate change under control.
And mentioning those attacks on allies, he attacked the United Nations, but he also singled out the EU and European countries, not just on climate change, as you've been mentioning there, but on migration as well, on what we were discussing here yesterday, the recognition of the state of Palestine, he said, was continuing the conflict there.
Yeah, he didn't spend much time at all on Gaza, did he? He just essentially said that Europe, the European nations who have recently recognized a Palestinian state, that they made the wrong decision, that they were rewarding Hamas. So again, just another instance where we see this real break from the U.S. and its allies. Allies who say, look, the United States, we all used to see the United States as an honest broker in the past. I think Europe is understanding now that it's very hard to defend that position, that the United States is the one who can bring both parties to the table. And so we heard the French President Emmanuel Macron saying yesterday it is the collective responsibility of the countries here. Europe now feels it is their responsibility as well to get some kind of peace back on track. So there was that break, and certainly on migration. I mean, Donald Trump was talking about almost as if he was the savior of Western civilization. Talking about how the London mayor wanted Sharia law, remarks that many will find incredibly Islamophobic, racist. He also
and we should say are false.
Are false, and he, talked about the need for to stop illegal aliens from pouring into Europe. And this really follows some of his, officials in his administration lecturing Europe in the past, trying to interfere, quite frankly, in European elections to try to help like-minded allies in those countries win power and gain more seats in parliaments there. So this was definitely a message from Donald Trump, not just to the rest of the world, but his European allies, that he wants his vision to be the dominant vision.
Another remarkable point, which we didn't hear from President Trump and we ordinarily hear from leaders, American presidents and otherwise, is talking about inequality in the world, talking about humanitarian crises, talking about starvation, malnutrition, displacement. I mean, on the question of Gaza, he didn't mention that at all.
Yeah, and look, I think diplomats here at the UN understand that the U.S. is very happily ceding its role as kind of a leader at this global body and any kind of global cooperation. And so from that perspective, I guess it was unsurprising to them that Donald Trump didn't feel the need to talk about some of the most pressing global challenges, because he is focused on just what interests America from his perspective. And so that does leave a big gap on who's going to fill that role here at the United Nations. Is it going to be China? Is it going to be a coalition of other countries? Because, of course, in the United States, the inequality gap is growing, despite Donald Trump talking about having, grocery prices go down, which they're not, or inflation go down, which it's not. So countries around the world are facing those similar problems, but the United States has shown no interest in helping resolve those crises.
Another interesting thing about this speech, and you touched on it there, was the whole first chunk of it was almost like a Donald Trump candidate campaign rally, wasn't it? Like lauding his achievements, criticizing Joe Biden. I think he mentioned him in maybe his third sentence here at this address. We don't usually see leaders reflecting on their domestic situations like that.
Absolutely. One UN official told me, why would he bring up a past administration when it has nothing to do with what's going on now? And why would he talk this way about foreigners in a room full of foreigners? So there was so much about this speech that confounded many people in the room. But for those of us who have followed Donald Trump, Katrina, I mean, he wants to kind of talk as though the world was perfect before Joe Biden came in and he essentially inherited all of these problems. President Trump trying to portray to the global community that he is the statesman that can kind of make the world better. So that's very much on brand for Donald Trump, I would say.
Okay, Neda, thank you so much for that analysis. We'll hear from you a little bit later on.